Hello, I got a note here that we're live, and welcome to our session on Blackboard Data. If I could just maybe have a confirmation. Very good, thank you. So, welcome. So Blackboard Data, of course, is a beautiful product that Blackboard releases to SaaS clients without cost. And by the way, my name is Szymon Machajewski, and I'm an Assistant Director at UIC for Innovation and Academic Tools. And I just love the idea of playing with the learning management system, but also working with faculty. I teach as well, and so stay in touch with really the product, of our industry. So I want to start here, though, with a little bit of a public announcement, and that is something that goes maybe a little bit outside of our immediate interests, and that is I'm going to share in the chat a link to this topic of air quality and how it affects cognitive performance. And I just encourage everyone to take a look at that, because as our students are at home, the air quality is not only controlled by commercial codes, and also our instructors are at home. So this is a very important topic. I just wanted to plug it in. All right, now let's move to something that we can use our cognitive performance in, and that is Blackboard Data. I want to start by saying something that perhaps is important not just for techies that are playing with Blackboard Data, but for instructional designers and faculty most of all. What we know about data analytics, and more specifically learning analytics, is that it is such a growing field, and so many people want to be able to make decision-driven, or they want to be able to make decisions that are data-driven, that this field has become a center for possible problems, such as bias, such as marking students with flags, or otherwise marking them as not able to complete programs or maybe even attend schools based on data about them. And so one thing that I want to share about that is that the more we study this particular topic, we realize that faculty have a key role in helping their students to leave behind data analytics path, or basically leaving behind data that's accurate and data that really reflects the capacity that students have for academic success, and also their history. So I'm going to share another article here that touches a little bit on this problem that we have developing, and that is, if faculty do not use the LMS well, correctly, or with best practices in mind, they might be leaving analytics data behind that is not representative of their students. So for example, in this article, one faculty member brings out that, hey, what if you have an assignment, and of course you accept some digital submissions for the assignment, but then you also chose to accept this assignment in an analog way, maybe through a live paper submission, and the LMS now marks that student as a late assignment, maybe even not submitted assignment. And so that's how we can possibly produce analytics data about students that is not true, and that might misinform future algorithms that go behind it. So this kind of bias that might be produced inside of data can have to do with our natural bias, such as survivorship bias, where we only use data that's available, not realizing that there are data gaps, and the data that we don't have is actually probably more important. There are also biases inside of algorithms as the data gets crunched. But again, for instructional designers, one more reason why it's important to train faculty, to have them be specialists in LMS use, is because the quality of data analytics and quality inside of Blackboard Data is going to depend on their skills and their best practices, best behaviors in using the courses. So soon, we're going to publish a paper through EDUCAUSE, and when I say we, it's going to be part of the EDUCAUSE Student Success Analytics Practitioners Group, and so the committee is preparing paper on the very idea of bias in data and how it influences academic institutions. But I'd like to take an opportunity to invite you to this particular group, which is based on just a variety of institutions, a variety of approaches to analytics. We have a listserv, we have a Slack channel, and we can continue to discuss how analytics can lead to student success. And at the same time that I have you here on the call, I also want to share our internal tool to the Blackboard community user group that is being just now formed to go ahead and to deal with Blackboard data, how to make it more effective, how to help this adoption of this free resource that Blackboard made available. And so we're just getting organized, getting started. And one of the discussions that is going on right now is, what are the sources of data that we have inside of Blackboard, and how perhaps we can tap into putting some kind of an umbrella or a way to have these resources being accessed so that the reports don't simply go to the administrators, right? Because this is really not great for this culture of data when the reports that you do in SQL or otherwise, those reports only arrive at the administrator's desk in order to make some kind of institutional decisions. How about students seeing some of this data and validating it? And how about instructors seeing some of this data? And so those are some of the things that we're thinking about. But I want to start by showing you a specific tool that I hope we can share within this group and also develop it further. And this one specifically deals with storage inside of Blackboard. Now you might be surprised, but Blackboard data does track all the content that is inside of the course, and it provides a very specific value for total course usage, which are all the files that are actually linked inside of the course. Well, what about all the files that are in the course that are not linked, or maybe all the files in legacy storage, right? Well, as you may know, it is very difficult for instructors right now to actually see the total of storage that they have, which is why this tool. So I am in Blackboard. I am going to look at a specific course, and under course tools, I now have course storage. And when I click on course storage, this is going to first of all bring some information to my attention about the need to have not just sort of a hoarding experience with data, but to have data inside of the course that's accurate, that's current, that has validity to it. And so we then explain where you can find more information on how to mitigate some of these situations. But we also are reaching into multiple sources, such as Blackboard data, but also the DDA, and then presenting this information to instructors. So not only the report, like the inside report that says, hey, the organization is over this much, and by the way, here are the troublemakers, but the faculty can visit this and then see exactly where the sizes are. The file types are broken into course files, and such as files uploaded into the course by instructors, but then the homework that the students are submitting, or otherwise called protected files, and then any legacy files that you might be surprised do have a pretty huge impact on some of our installations. Now, this particular tool, I do have a very short video that I'm going to share with you that you can later on sort of refer to. But what we have here is then the total, and then we have broken up the details of image files, export packages, and so forth. But again, not only do we have room here to provide these details, but then also links onto how to mitigate the situation. Beyond that, when the instructor clicks next, they can see all their other courses, and then perhaps sort by some value to see how they can go ahead and find the data that is going to help them be within the course quota that we've selected, and so that gives them a nice view. Now, this cannot directly come out of Blackboard data. So one of the things that I want to stress is that we have multiple sources of data, and there's a very good reason why this data user group, one of the things that we'll talk about is how we can create this missing link that will make this data actually available in courses like this. So if I was to connect this directly to Blackboard data, there is going to be a delay. Now, the delay doesn't have to do even with processing of the data and putting it in Snowflake, but the delay has to do with how quickly the database can be queried. Now, our Snowflake database, so our Blackboard data, has data going back to about 2014, right? So for when we activated Blackboard data, we actually had courses going way back then, and all the activity about courses was then put into the Snowflake system. So we have some nice, background information, and we're now have a project of trying to move some of the data out of Blackboard data into our enterprise data warehouse on campus, which then allows researchers to see, for example, how the pandemic affected the course tools usage, or how much students were spending time in courses. So if we were to connect this directly to Snowflake, all this data from 2014 and earlier would have made it very, very slow to interact with. So what we had to do is we had to bubble this data up to a caching system, or basically some kind of a data source that can respond in sub-second latency, and of course make it a tool that's usable to instructors. And so that's one of the things that I hope that we can accomplish through our user group. I'm not just sharing how we did this, and this is going to be on GitHub, and if you want to take the time, we'll be able to recreate it, but then also how to make, in general, this kind of a data from multiple sources around Blackboard to be at a click's notice, to be where it needs to be, which is in front of the end users, such as students or instructors. So this particular tool is just an example of what can be done. But let me go ahead and transition here to very quickly to some of the other data sources that we have inside of Blackboard. So there it is. And so one of the data sources that we can use in parallel to Blackboard data is Google Analytics. And I am sure that most of you know, you just phone call Blackboard support. If you're SaaS, they will add your Google marker or the ID. And the reason why this is useful is because not only can you drill into content, but it will also measure response time from your servers. And so very quickly, you'll be able to tell, hey, is the slowdown only on one app server? Is it on all of them? And then, is this something that affects the institution? Now, Blackboard data itself as a source is an excellent, piece of work. I'm really impressed by the data dictionary, of course, that Blackboard was able to publish, so to inform us of how to use it. And then, of course, the let me see, the Snowflake, which is this interface, and our ability to use SQL to sort of break down the data and use it to how we want to. By the way, don't be afraid of SQL. It happens to be a tool that can be used by copying and pasting. And so I sort of want to plug in a resource for anybody who is thinking about getting started with Blackboard data, and that is just a selection of blog posts with links to even GitHub, where we over time shared the either starter SQL or some advanced queries that allow you to get out of Blackboard data what you need. And so I think that this developer, the free layer here is very, very useful. It reminds us a little bit of this other data source, and that is the DDA, or direct access. Again, you still have SQL, right? So that's there. But the DDA, for example, is a nice source that can give you almost real-time access, and also more detail in the file storage, for example. So the tool I showed earlier, it was a mix of data between DDA and Blackboard Data, and again cached so that it can work inside of an application. And something I am very excited about is UI that's being added to Blackboard Data. So for everybody that perhaps has some reservations about SQL, now part of Blackboard Data, we have these UI reports, graphs based on an Amazon toolkit, and it works really great. So you can look at tool adoption, you can look at your platform adoption, but also reports from Collaborate. So thumbs up for Blackboard for really preparing this kind of analytics tool that has a nice GUI to it as well. And I also want to mention Easysoft, and some of their recent business decisions we won't hold against them, but Easysoft is also a great data source. For example, they have course level reports for instructors. So what I said earlier is the need to put more data in front of students and instructors. Well, Easysoft does that fairly well by providing course level reports for instructors. But then at the organizational level, you also can benefit from these Easysoft reports. So a nice data source. Now, what you're looking at right now is a Tableau report. And by the way, Tableau, just like Pyramid or Power BI, is a tool to connect some data source to, and then create your own stories, your own reports. And so you can use the free version of Tableau. You just sign up for an account, download a program, and then you can publish to their servers. So just make sure you don't include, of course, personal data. But at organizational level, you can discuss that with your security team. Typically, that's not a HIPAA or FERPA protected data, and you can mark these reports as unlisted. And so it actually is quite a useful tool. But the Tableau allows you to then take data out of Snowflake, and so you can do that, for example, by exporting to a CSV file, and then you upload it to Tableau, and then you get to play with your data. And oftentimes, that's the best way to overcome the bias again. I already mentioned the survivorship bias, but confirmation bias, where often we have an idea first, and then we look for data to prove it, right? And so that's why I like Tableau, because it allows us to maybe look at stories about our data that we did not expect. And this is just another example inside of Tableau to a detailed view. And we actually made this available to instructors, where deans, instructors were able to see at performance inside of courses. And of course, we have some Tableau reports that go to Blackboard Data that are spent a number of years. And so this can be fairly useful as well. We also have Tableau reports that put together Blackboard Data with the DDA access. And so here you have an example of showing engagement inside of classes, but also their storage use. So sort of a friendly interface for instructors. Something to mention too is that in our community, Blackboard community, we've worked over time to develop some standards and some even applications to help with looking at data. So BbStats is a building block that's been around for a while, and there's some plans to make it an LTI tool. But something to think about are the patterns of course design, where the building block can tell you how many holistic courses you have, how many of them primarily just hold content, and which courses might be just supplements to in-class activities. So some of the questions that we ask when considering Blackboard Data, and some of the projects we are sort of working out right now, is, for example, what are the weekly patterns of engagement of learners who achieve highly in my subject? And so what we're trying to look at is to look for scenarios where instructors have questions, they have needs, and then they will go ahead and use dashboards to answer those. Then which tools or artifacts and activities are most accessed in my subject before assessment tasks are due compared to weekly patterns over the duration of the semester? Blackboard Data does have the content items and access activity necessary to answer that question. Or does learner engagement in the first 3 weeks of my course tell me anything about learners' likely academic achievement in my subject? I think this is a good question, because oftentimes, we are using data and perhaps even define students' success in terms of grades. And so the more data we can put in front of instructors, the more likely that we are able to have the instructors look for other stories in the data. So not just grades, but perhaps, again, the engagement, how much time students are spending. Or maybe, hey, there are parts of my course that are totally useless, nobody's looking at them. Or maybe they should be looking at them, but they aren't. And so those might be the stories that perhaps we touch on in addition to just grades. And then the last question: to what extent does the impact of guest expert in a discussion forum change engagement patterns in a discussion-based assessment test? So again, those are questions that can be answered with Blackboard data. And so as a community, we hope that we can put our minds together to create the SQL statements and then the UI interfaces to go ahead and answer those. And so this takes me to the subject that hopefully is going to sort of put together what we've talked about so far. And that is data democratization. Now, data democratization is sort of a new approach to data. If you think about classical IT, there are people who are privileged, those who have access, and then all the users that basically generate that data, but oftentimes do not have access to the results of the data. They have no way maybe to dispute the data. A little bit like credit reports in the past. Now, of course, you have some options to look at your credit reports, but people making decisions based on data that's about you, but you not really having a great way of selecting which data would be qualifying. So what data democratization is, it's an effort to do basically three things. One, to provide self-service tools to the end users, not only so that they can validate the data, but also so that they can become stakeholder scientists. And we can call them citizen scientists. We want people to have the tools in order to learn new behaviors, in order to be able to create the data that they want to see in the wake of their academic performance. This is why, for example, that storage tool that we discussed, we had to take the data out of Blackboard Data and DDA and then put it into some kind of a cached system. Well, perhaps the answer to do that is if we could take this data from various sources like this and put it into store where REST API can reach it, and then our applications based on REST API will be able to pick out the data in live, sort of production, time. So perhaps that's one way to do that. And I'm not saying I have all the answers to this particular question, but instead of creating file caching or some temporary databases, maybe putting it back into places inside of Learn where REST API can draw it back. Maybe that's one way to do that. The other part of data democratization is the education of our stakeholders about data. So teaching students and instructors how to read visualizations. Perhaps teaching them about how to create good data about themselves and how to pay attention to that data. Teaching instructors and students about bias. There are some great resources that talk about bias that educators have, and they don't realize that they have that. I don't have that link readily available, but it's on my LinkedIn page. So if you visit one of my recent posts, it basically talks about how far-reaching bias that instructors have and sometimes don't realize, how that can be far-reaching in sometimes preventing student success. But at least learning about bias helps us to focus on it and maybe avoid it to some extent. And then the third thing that this particular initiative calls for is trying to regulate access to data. Not with the idea that no one can have access but the DBA, but having some self-governance established on campus about data. giving data to people who need access to it. And then, of course, keeping web accessibility as the top priority while doing so. So I spoke with quite a few people who basically feel like, hey, we have to protect data. I'll get fired if this innovation will take place. No, that cannot be, this kind of a paralyzing response. We need to have bodies on campus that can take a look at who should see what data and then make it accessible to those that can make good use of it and really support the growth of the community. And this is just an example. Right now you're looking at of a graph that requires a little bit of data education, data literacy to understand. Yeah, let's say that you're voting, should we adopt Blackboard Data or not? And yeses have it, right? The majority of people said yes. Well, notice where our access starts. It starts at 45. So in reality, the total response to this particular poll was not that obvious. And there was a lot more no votes than the first draft made us believe. So those are the kind of data literacy skills that we need, not just for our academic data, but things that we see on TV and so forth. So I have a few links here in the slides, and of course you can download the slides separately. If you are writing any academic work on learning analytics, quite a few references for you to take a look at. And also a link to the paper I mentioned earlier on how to distinguish holistic courses from others, such as ones that simply use courses as storage. All right, so with this being said, I've missed a little bit on the discussion, and perhaps see, Mary, I'm looking at some questions that we might want to answer. I'm looking at the panel right now. So I see one here.
There you go.
Is there
there's one? Sorry, there's a delay. There's one question on the chat regarding the Slack space for the EduCause group. If there's a techie space that you can share as a link.
Yeah, so the EduCause Slack, let me just see, invite people and copy link. All right, so I'm going to put in the link. This is the link to the Slack to the EduCause group. And then we also we have a Slack also for techies, and if you're looking for some Star Wars jokes, just go ahead and come in. Was there another question?
Well, there were several questions regarding on how to connect with BbData and how do we extract information, but we answered those in the chat with Steve and the rest of the group in place, so we're good there. There was one specific question, Simon, that might be interesting for you to go back, which is related to the document you shared where you had the Tableau link. They want to know how did you did that integration to have that Tableau link in that document itself.
I'm perhaps not understanding. There was a link in Tableau document. You mean how we put together the Tableau reports? Is that the okay? Yes. So the Snowflake, of course, is the data source, and you have a number of ways to go from here. The easiest, just to explore the data and build some initial Tableau reports, is to, of course, sign up for the free account from Tableau, install the program, and then go to Snowflake and simply export the data to a CSV file. And then the free version of Tableau allows you to upload the CSV file, and now you are exploring the data. Once you're ready for some kind of a second step, there are actually ways to take so the reason why I'm explaining is because we want to do it for free, right? Because if you're willing to pay for the Tableau license, then you just straight connect Snowflake to your Tableau and you're golden. But if you want to do it for free, what you can do is you take the Snowflake system and you can connect it to Google Sheets, Now, that connection can be done through a number of vendors that'll do it, but you can also use Perl to simply say, I want data out of Snowflake, I'm going to put it in Google Sheet. And then Tableau will connect to that Google Sheet that is shared. So you're not actually publishing the data in Google Sheet to the world. You're simply connecting a private Google Sheet to the Tableau backend. And so at that point, as soon as the data is in the Snowflake system, it's copied to the Google Sheet, and then it's copied to your reports. But if you are at the place where you're saying, hey, I want to go live with some of these reports, then maybe having a conversation with your IT department and investing in a Tableau license would be the simplest, because then you have a direct connection between the two.
Great. Thank you very much, Szymon. That was an interesting conversation and a great presentation. Thank you for joining us. So, folks, thanks very much, everyone, for joining. We're at the time. We got to the end of this session today. Keep enjoying BbWorld 2021, and thanks very much to everyone for all the questions. Take care. Thank you, Szymon.
Thank you.